Okay, guys, today we're going to be reading this story called Balloons Over Broadway. It's by Melissa Sweet, and it's actually a Caldecott winning author, and she got the Robert F. Seibert medal for it. So very cool. It's, as you can think of, it is a story about a parade, and I think we might recognize the parade as the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. So since we're coming up to Thanksgiving, we have this nice little story we're going to read and an activity that we're going to do with it. So I'm going to share this story under our ladybug, and we're going to listen to the story, and I'm going to explain the activity you're going to complete. So we have a story called Balloons Over Broadway. Balloons Over Broadway, the true story of the puppeteer of Macy's Parade. And the author has, this is not the author, but the author has included a picture of the original puppeteer, Anthony Tony Frederick Sarg. He was born in 1880 and lived until 1942. And it has a quote from Mr. Tony Sarg: "Every little movement has a meaning of its own." From the time he was a little boy, Tony Sarg loved to figure out how to make things move. He once said he became a marionette man when he was only 6 years old. His father had asked him to feed the chickens at 6:30 in the morning every day. Tony had an idea. What if he could feed the chickens without leaving his bed? He rigged up some pulleys and ran rope from the chicken coop door to his bedroom window. That night, he spread chicken feed outside the chicken coop door. The next morning, that was the alarm clock. Tony pulled on the rope and the door to the chicken coop opened. The chickens ate their breakfast. Tony stayed snug in his bed, and his dad, so impressed, never made Tony do another chore. So this was his plan: spread feed the night before. That's step 1. Step 2, pull the rope. Step 3, the door opens. Step 4, chickens come out and they get to eat the feed. When Tony grew up, he moved to London, where he discovered that no one was making marionettes for kids anymore. So out of wood, cloth, and strings, Tony began to make puppets. He figured out ways to make his marionettes' movements so lifelike that they performed as if they were real actors. Word soon spread about Tony's amazing marionettes. When Tony moved to New York City, the Tony Sarg marionettes began performing on Broadway. In the heart of New York City, in Herald Square, was the biggest store on earth, H.R. Macy's department store. Macy's had heard about Tony's puppets and asked him to design a puppet parade for the store's holiday windows. So Tony made new puppets based on storybook characters, then attached them to gears and pulleys to make them move. See, we have his storefront window, Macy's Wondertown. In Macy's Wondertown windows, Tony's mechanical marionettes danced across the stage as if by magic. All day long, they performed to shoppers, jostling for a better look. But Macy's had an even bigger job in store for Tony. Many of the people working at Macy's were immigrants, and as the holidays approached, they missed their own holiday traditions of music and dancing in the streets. Macy's agreed to put on a parade for their employees, and they hired Tony to help. Tony, too, was an immigrant, So he loved the idea of creating a parade based on street carnivals from all around the world. He made costumes and built horse-drawn floats. And Macy's even arranged to bring in bears, elephants, and camels from the Central Park Zoo. The animals joined hundreds of Macy's employees on Thanksgiving Day, 1924, winding their way from Harlem to Herald Square. It was a dazzling parade. In fact, Macy's first parade was such a success that they decided to have one every year on Thanksgiving Day to celebrate America's own holiday. Each year, the parade grew, but when Macy's brought in lions and tigers, in addition to bears, elephants, and camels, the animals roared and growled and frightened the children. Tony, can you think of something spectacular? Okay. Macy's asked Tony to replace the animals. Tony hoped to replace the animals with some kind of puppets, but his marionettes were less than 3 feet tall. He would have to make much larger puppets in order for them to be seen in the parade. And how could he make them strong enough to hold up in bad weather, yet light enough to move up and down the streets? Tony knew of a company in Ohio that made blimps out of rubber, the perfect material for any weather. When he called the company and showed them his sketches, they agreed to make what Tony wanted. But how would Tony make his big puppets move? This is a blimp. The company is Goodyear, constructing using simple shapes glued together, and it looks like a caterpillar. Then Tony had an idea from an Indonesian rod puppet in his toy collection. On Thanksgiving Day, Tony's creatures, some as high as 16 feet, spilled into the streets, and the crowds cheered wildly. Part puppet, part balloon, the air-filled rubber bags wobbled down the avenues, propped up by wooden sticks. But now the sidewalks were so packed with people that only those in the first few rows could actually see the parade. Tony realized his puppets would need to be even bigger and higher off the ground. And though the sticks helped to steer the puppets, they were stiff and heavy. Tony wanted his balloons to articulate, to move and gesture more like puppets. But how? With the marionette, the controls are above and the puppet hangs down. But what if the controls were below and the puppet could rise up? During the next year, Tony set his new idea into motion. This time he asked the company in Ohio to make balloons out of rubberized silk, as strong as rubber, but lighter than rubber alone. Most important, Tony ordered the balloons to be filled not just with air, but with helium too. Since helium is lighter than air, it would make the balloons rise. Once the puppets were completed, they were deflated and shipped back to Tony in New York. Tony did not know if everything would go as planned. What if the balloons are filled with too much helium? What if one hits a sharp object? Will they fit under the elevated train track? It was still dark on Thanksgiving morning when Tony filled the balloons with helium, tethering them down with sandbags. But by 1 p.m., the sidewalks were packed with people ready for the parade. Then one by one, Tony cut the lines to the sandbags. Let's have a parade. Then we got this long balloon. Whoop. And the magnificent upside down marionettes rose up to the sky. Nodding and waving to the crowds below, they sailed past Central Park. They sailed down Broadway. They shimmied and swayed through the canyons of New York City. High above the crowds, they flounced in the afternoon wind, pulling the rope handlers this way and that. Yet, with every heave-ho, the balloons gestured and articulated like wild puppets, and the crowd screamed for more. After the balloons were eased under the L, they ended in front of Macy's at Tony's Wondertown windows. It was a parade New Yorkers would never forget. And from that day on, every Thanksgiving morning, crowds have lined the sidewalks of New York City to see what balloons would rise to the skies for Macy's famous parade. Tony Sard, the puppeteer who loved to figure out how to make things move, had set the stage with a little rigging for a puppet to be anything anyone could imagine it to be. And then there's a really long author's note about the different things about Tony Sard and his balloon animals. And there's a lot of thank yous. And what we have is called a bibliography and sources. That means all of this is factual information that was researched and listed as to where they found their research. So very interesting book. And here is an actual article from the newspaper. Pretty cool. And from there, what you're going to do, you have this paper. It's called Balloons Over Broadway. If you could create a balloon character for Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, what would it be? Draw a detailed picture of your balloon and describe it. So I might start with my actual sentences. I would like you to write at least 2 sentences describing your balloon. So you can think of anything that you want. It could be a cartoon you like. It could be a musician, a movie. It could be a person. It could be an animal. It could be whatever you want this balloon to be. A lot of friends have a lot of creative things. So I want you to think about what you want your balloon to look like. Mrs. Pierce's balloon, I think I'm going to do a balloon of my dog, Luna. So I would describe it as my thanks. Make sure you capitalize T in thanks. Thanksgiving parade balloon would be designed to look like my dog Luna, period. Since, capital S, since she is a fun, loving, zany basset hound, basset, I think there's 2 T's in basset, basset hound, she will be shown with her tongue out, tail wagging. I put a comma, and let's say maybe mud on her fur, because she's always out there digging holes in my garden. So I want to show Luna how she always is. And then maybe I'm going to draw my Luna girl. Not the best artist over here, but you know, I got my dog's head. A basset hound has really long ears. She's got a long body. Like I said, her tail's wagging. It's always up in the air wagging. Got her little hind legs. Her long body. She's got her little bandana that she always wears around her collar. And then her front feet to make that complete. And then I told you she's got her tongue out. So that's like her tongue. That's her nose. And then her eyes. And she's got, I'm going to make it detailed because I'm also going to come back and have a colored picture for my drawing. So make sure you have some art supplies. And that's kind of my picture of Luna. I got to draw my balloon strings coming down. And maybe I add a background to it. We're in New York City, so we've got some buildings. If you've ever been to New York, it's like there's no space in between any building. And they're just constantly, there's nothing behind them. There's just constant buildings everywhere. No real trees or anything anywhere. So maybe I just have a bunch of buildings in the background to show some background to my picture. And then of course I want to come out and color my picture. But I am looking for some really detailed writing for your Macy's Thanksgiving Parade idea. And what you need to do is you need to upload a picture. There will be an assignment called Balloons Over Broadway. There will be, I will ask that you take a really nice picture on your Chromebook. So if I stop my screen share, I'm going to show you. If I were you and you pick up your picture, don't take your picture way back here because Mrs. Pierce can't read your writing. Instead, put it as close to the screen as you can where you can still see the writing at the bottom. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.